What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bias Boston Sports Report. I'm Jordan Leandri, hosting it this week. Pete's sick, so I'm running the show this week. It was going to be us, me, Kaylee, and Pete, but now it's just me and Kaylee. Kaylee, how you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Ready to talk a little bit about the Celtics. This year was a very fun year. They went 53-29, exceeding expectations and becoming the Eastern Conference. They won the Eastern Conference with their 53-29 record, beating the Cavs. Only when it came time to the playoffs, they wound up, crapping their pants and getting bounced in 5 games. Without Isaiah Thomas for three and a half of them, but still worth noting that they're only one game better against Cleveland than they were 2 years ago. So I'll let you start with your quick little recap of how you thought the Celtics fared this season, and then I'll respond to that.
From a fan standpoint, I mean, it was good. They've gotten better. I mean, playoffs better than I expected. Regular season way better than I expected. There's improvements that could be made, but they also made their own improvements. I mean, I was happy. Could have been better. Could have been worse.
Yeah, definitely. Considering the way the first round started against Chicago and they lost those first 2 games, I was beginning to doubt their ability to compete in these big games. They were down 2-0. Rondo got hurt. The Celtics did come back and wound up winning the next four and winning that series in 6 games, saving us the stress of that 7 game series until the next round against Washington, which I thought they played very well against. But we did definitely see the same issues we saw for them the entire season. Their rebounding still is very poor. They struggle when Isaiah Thomas was off the floor, especially in that Washington series. We saw a lot of massive runs the Wizards went on over the course of that series with Isaiah Thomas both on the floor and off the floor. We saw how much of a liability Thomas can be defensively. So there's the same issues, but definitely it was encouraging to see them improve on last year. And it was nice to see Al Horford step up in the playoffs and earn that big contract that a lot of people thought he was not doing during the regular season with a lot of no shows. But in the playoffs, except for that Cleveland series, he was pretty on. He was pretty on every single game, pretty much a lock from mid range, all that kind of stuff. He was fantastic over the course of the playoffs, and I was very impressed. And I thought he earned his paycheck then. Do you have
I
anything else?
still am salty that Ainge didn't get a rebounder at the deadline. That could have helped a little bit, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think when you look back on it, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals without making a single move at the
Yeah.
deadline, it does kind of bail Ainge out a little bit. I do agree that I think they should have at least made a push for Nerlens Noel, Andrew Bogut, one of those guys, but they didn't. But they did still make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. While I think a rebounder would have helped them immensely, especially against Washington. I think that they could have ended the series relatively earlier, like maybe in 5 or 6
Yep.
with the rebounder. And then I think they would have competed better against the Cavs if Tristan Thompson was getting every 50-50 ball when he was on the field. But getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, not having to trade any of those Brooklyn picks, I think really helped the Celtics, especially going forward now that we know that we're only a game closer to beating the Cavs. So now you can move towards the future, and then when a guy like the Markelle Fultz Lonzo Ball, depending on who the Celtics take of that first pick, reaches their prime, LeBron's pretty much on his way out. So I think that's a good.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about the guys in the starting five. We'll analyze them guy by guy. I'll start with the worst guy. I'll start with Amir Johnson. I
Yeah.
thought he over the course of the regular season, I think he was kind of inconsistent. There were times where he would show up and be absolutely fantastic. He'd have like 10 and 10. He'd have a double double. He'd play very good defense, and then there were games where he would just be an absolute no show. And then when it came time to the playoffs, he was a no show more than he showed up. I mean, we talk about a guy who's one of the more respected players in the league, is a veteran. A lot of people like him, making 12 million a year, or made 12 million this year, and he was benched 3 different occasions in the playoffs for guys like Gerald Green and like you know random guys that you wouldn't expect to have to start in a playoff game when you have Amir Johnson, who's a capable veteran, just falling apart in the playoffs. And that was something that really irritated me. And I think he's definitely one of the guys the Celtics should try and move on from
Yep.
this offseason. I'd give him probably for the regular season, I'd give him probably a C, C plus grade. For the playoffs, I'd give him an F. If I could go lower, I would. What are your thoughts on Amir Johnson?
The inconsistency was putrid. I mean, he'd have little spurts of like shooting where he could make a couple of threes and then like go over 15 or something stupid. And he's one of the big guys, and he could have helped so much with rebounding and like actually blocking someone, but I hope he can go somewhere else so this team can improve. Definitely.
Yeah, with guys coming from overseas like Gershon
Yeah.
Yabusele and Anthony Zizic, I mean, I don't think there's any room for Amir Johnson
Yeah,
anymore
no.
unless he's willing to take like a veteran minimum deal to be like Tyler Zeller was this year. So that's really the only future I see for Amir Johnson in Boston. But I think it's pretty safe to say that his time in Boston's done. He
Yep.
gave us a good year and a half of him, I think, because he was pretty effective his first year in Boston. This year, not so much. He's done his time. We'll always remember him. He'll be near and dear in our hearts. We'll just try to forget about the playoffs, and then we'll go on from Amir Johnson.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in Amir Johnson's career in Boston. We'll move on. We'll talk about Jay Crowder, another guy that was very inconsistent. I was listening to WEI a few weeks ago, and they were talking about how he's the kind of player that will average 14 but never score 14. He'll be a guy that will score 7 or 21. He'll never score the 14 points. And I think we got a glimpse of how mentally weak he is. I mean, he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy to get off of you because he is a very physical player. But I think once you get into his head, he's pretty much checked out for the entire game, or even a series of games, like we saw in the regular season after the whole Twitter bitch fest he had after the Celtics fans cheered for Gordon Hayward. He was like he went like 2 games in a row where he averaged like or maybe 3 or 4 games in a row where he averaged like a game in that span. And the inconsistencies with him. I mean, obviously a better player than Amir Johnson, but it kind of gave the same effect as Amir Johnson did. He just wasn't playing well every single night, and we needed that in the playoffs, and it just didn't come through. He was probably one of the better players in the Cleveland series, especially the game they won. He played huge in that game, especially late, but he was just so inconsistent, and that really bothered me also, as well as Amir Johnson. What are your thoughts on Jay Crowder?
I love his physicality, but like you said, he's just so mentally soft. He's just not going to make it here. I prefer Hayward amazingly. Like, he takes stupid threes. He's so inconsistent on defense. I need to see him out of here, honestly.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that I think is very expendable, especially if Gordon Hayward does sign in Boston. I don't think he's a guy that'll buy into being a bench player because
Yeah.
if he did, I would be all for keeping him around because I feel like he'd be a great 6-7 guy off the bench, and he can play very very good minutes, especially against teams that have more physical threes that Gordon Hayward wouldn't be able to guard. But I don't think he'd buy into that role, so I think they're gonna have to try and shop him around this offseason, definitely, especially if they get Hayward. And we'll move on to Avery Bradley. Bradley was very good this year. I thought he was kind of snubbed to the All-Star game, because he was playing very very well in the first half of the season, scoring, defense. He was fantastic. I think he's a guy that the Celtics are going to have to make a tough decision on this offseason. I think he's coming on into his last year of his deal next year, and he's a guy that might even attract max dollars from the Celtics team. He's consistently improved, and I think if he comes up next year and has an even bigger season where he's averaging say 20 points a game and he's playing lockdown defense, I think the Celtics have to make a big decision next offseason when it comes to how they handle Avery Bradley. This season, I think, aside from the injuries, when he was healthy, I'd give him probably a B plus because he was consistently one of the better players on the floor for Boston. The only issue was he wasn't on the floor all the time. And that's something that really derailed them last year in the playoffs. And then we saw that this year when he was off the floor, how much the Celtics struggled on both sides of the ball. What are your thoughts?
When healthy, I think he's probably Boss's most talented overall player. His defense is second to none. He's a pretty solid shooter, like, the game 3 winner against Cleveland. That was awesome. He's done that before. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope he stays here. He could stay or go, but I think they'll probably keep him. He's worth the money.
He's definitely worth it. And I think, if it comes to, making a decision between Isaiah Thomas and Avery Bradley, I think I'd probably be more willing to go to Avery Bradley only because he's I mean, obviously he's not as creative offensively as Isaiah Thomas is, but I think the defense alone might put him on a whole other level than Isaiah Thomas is at. So I think it definitely would be an Avery Bradley. I would definitely swing more towards Avery Bradley than Isaiah Thomas if I have to make a choice between the two, especially after this draft where the Celtics will likely draft either Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball, the two top prospects, both at the point guard position. You have anything else to add on Avery Bradley?
I think that's all.
Okay, so we'll move on now. We'll talk about Al Horford in the first year of a max deal. I'll let you start because I think I've started every single topic we've gone on so far. So you can go first on Al Horford.
He had a pretty shaky regular season. I was kind of worried about that, but I did not expect him to turn it on in the playoffs the way he did. I mean, he's doing everything. He single-handedly won a few games. He was averaging triple doubles kind of often. I mean, he did everything you wanted him to. He could rebound. He could actually shoot. He kept the ball rolling. Definitely worth the money, worth every penny.
Every penny in the playoffs, definitely. In the regular
Yeah.
season, I mean, there was a couple injuries he dealt with, especially in the beginning. He had the concussion, so he missed some time there. But he was very shaky over the course of the regular season. But it was definitely very encouraging to see a guy who people say notoriously chokes in the playoffs. His teams never win anything. To see him turn it on like that definitely is an encouraging sign moving forward, especially since they've got 3 more years left on this max contract with Al Horford. So it's definitely encouraging, and I think a lot of guys on the free agent market, like a lot of marquee guys, will like to look at a guy like Al Horford as a veteran that they could play with and succeed with. Because Brad Stevens said back in the first press conference that Al Horford is a guy that can mold into any system you put him in because he's so much of a professional and he can adapt his game to any situation that he needs to be put into. And I think that's very encouraging, and I think that's something that the Celtics could use in the future to attract a free agent.
He's a great veteran player. He definitely helped keep this team together when times got tough. I think that's great.
Absolutely, especially defensively. I remember in the beginning of the season, he was blocking shots left and right. He was like averaging 3 blocks a game for the first month or two of the season. I mean, obviously that dropped a bit, but he definitely was one of the best players on the floor, and I would argue that he was the best player for the Celtics throughout the playoffs. I mean, I know Isaiah Thomas was the most efficient offensive player and the best player all around on the team throughout the first 2-3 rounds. But I think when it comes to the way the Celtics needed a guy to step up big, Al Horford did that, and I think he might be considered the best player for the Celtics over the course of the postseason.
He's such a selfless player. Like, he's probably the best passing center in the league, honestly, and that's helped so much.
Yeah, especially in the system the Celtics run with Brad Stevens. They have to have guys spread the floor, and Al Horford can do that. He can knock down threes, he can knock down the mid range, and he can pass to cutting guards with very good efficiency. I don't see him make very many bad passes. I mean, I'll see him force a few, but I'll never see him just make a pass for the sake of making a pass. He's a very smart basketball player, and I think moving forward, he's going to be a guy that we see more and more of in a more dominant role than we did over the course of this season.
Agreed.
We'll move on now to the little guy, Isaiah Thomas. This year, averaged 29 points a game. His best season of his career was an All-Star for the second time. MVP discussion, wasn't a finalist, but I think it's safe to say that he was probably fifth behind LeBron and then the 3 finalists we know about already. I'll let you start with what your thoughts on Isaiah Thomas were.
First and foremost, they're not better without him, so that's my main thing. I mean, obviously, when you have better defenders on the floor, you're going to be better on defense, but they're not a better overall team without him. Like, the team's leading scorer, you need him. The offense revolves around him, and I think he's great. I mean, a lot of people don't like him, obviously. He's a liability on defense, and he's short, but what he does in crunch time and what he dealt with this season, it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely I definitely gained a lot more respect for Isaiah Thomas than I had going into the postseason. I mean, it's very tough you see a lot of guys that miss, a game, 2, 3 when they lose a loved one over the course of a series. But Isaiah Thomas, he felt like he had a job to do, and he stayed around and he played. Granted, the first 2 games didn't go as expected against the Bulls, but after that, he turned the switch and he became the best player on the Celtics again for the course of that next series and a half when they faced Washington. He was able to turn it on, and that's definitely something that's encouraging. And what I like about him the most is that he's talking about how he's not worried about making big dollars. He wants the Celtics team to improve. So if that's the case, and he doesn't want to have to take and he's willing to not take a max deal, I'm definitely willing to keep him around because I mean, especially since he's also willing to have the Celtics draft Markelle Fultz, Alonzo Ball, and shift over to the 2 guard. And that's definitely something that I would love to see because he's definitely better off ball than he is on ball. And it gets him off the guys of John Wall, those types of players that can score and shoot over him because they're so much taller than him.
In a perfect world, he comes off the bench and is like an offensive spark plug, but I know he's not going to want to do that after the last 2 seasons he's had. And I guess that's okay, but I like the quote where he was totally okay with the Celtics getting better and getting younger and drafting Fultz or Ball or whoever. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I would absolutely love him to come off the bench, and if he's willing to be that six man, then there's absolutely no shot I would deal him because I think he'd be the best six man in the league. He'd be the single leader. He's just that good offensively. I think he'd be a huge spark plug off the bench, especially if Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball will really, and there's also Josh Jackson, but we'll talk about the two guards. If they blossom and they become, this top tier point guard that a lot of people see them being, if Isaiah Thomas is willing to come off the bench and be that six man, that's going to be really beneficial to the Celtics because then when the guys like Fultz, Ball come off the floor as well as Bradley, you're going to have another unit where there's going to be a lot of scoring, a lot of tempo, and that's something we didn't see when Thomas was off the floor, and then when he wasn't playing for the last 3 games of that Cavs series.
Yep.
We'll move on. We'll talk about the bench as a whole because I don't really feel like dissecting every single player, especially since Mickey, Demetrius Jackson, Tyler Zeller, those guys didn't play much over the course of the season. So we'll talk about the bench as a whole. And I think they're also really inconsistent. I mean, there were games where they would come in, they'd bail out the starters. I mean, we saw that a couple times in the Wizards series. Kelly Olynyk, specifically in Game 7, he had the game of his life, and the Celtics wound up winning that one to get into the Eastern Conference Finals. But the bench overall was very inconsistent, and I think it's definitely going to need some help this offseason, whether that be bringing in some hungry veterans or drafting guys or bringing in their overseas players, bringing guys up from the D League, whatever it's going to be. They need some guys that can play defense and they can shoot the ball, so that way it's not a complete drop-off once Isaiah Thomas takes a seat. What are your thoughts on the bench?
I don't know much about Zizic or Yabusele or whoever is overseas, but I think they could definitely help some way somehow because, like you said, it's just so inconsistent. Like that Wizards series was crazy. It was either home or away. Like away, they put up 5 points as a whole that one game, and then the next game they dropped 40 total. It's just you need consistency.
Definitely, and I think that's going to start with bringing in a hungry veteran. I don't know who exactly. My pipe dream is getting Vince Carter because I think he'd be huge off the bench for the Celtics. But I think they do need to get a veteran. They need to get younger on the bench, and they need to have more versatility because, I mean, you can't have Tyler Zeller, James Young playing crucial minutes in the end of the season in a tight race for the first seed in the Eastern Conference or in the playoffs. They just can't be playing. And they need guys that can come in and be like a second, scoring option off the bench. They need the guy that they can't have Marcus Smart being your number one scoring option off the bench. That just can't happen because you don't know what you're going to get from him on a nightly basis.
I'm not sure who else is in the draft really, but I hope they can draft at least a couple guys who can help somewhat there.
Yeah, they've got a lot of picks in the next couple of drafts, and they've got a bunch of guys that are coming over from overseas. So I think they're definitely going to get younger on the bench, especially if Zizic and Yabusele both are up with the Celtics next year. They're definitely going to get younger in that regard. But as far as this year goes, I mean, I'm more focused on that number one pick than I am later on because that's a guy that can completely turn your franchise around and take it by the throat. Lonzo Ball is getting comparisons to Jason Kidd, a Hall of Fame point guard, and Markelle Fultz to Russell Westbrook, who just averaged a triple-double. So, the Celtics, if they play their cards right, they could have a dynasty within the next couple of seasons. And that's definitely something to look forward to.
Definitely.
We'll now talk about the guys that we think are going to be back and who's not going to be back. I'll let you start with your list of who you think will be back next season for Boston.
I think Bradley will be here. Thomas will be here. Jalen. I think Gerald Green will probably be back. I liked what he did this season. I mean, considering 2007, 10 years ago, that's when he was really great here. I think he'll stay. Jerebko, I think he might stay. I mean, I liked what he did this season. Definitely a step up in his career. Rozier will probably be back. Not sure if I'm missing anyone. Smart will definitely be back. I think that's probably it.
My list is just, obviously Thomas will be back. I don't think they're going to trade him now, especially since I don't know what they're going to necessarily get for him. Thomas will definitely be back. Bradley will be back. I have, for my bench guys, Marcus Smart will be back. Kelly Olynyk, I think, will be back because I just think that they like him too much, and I don't think they're going to get rid of him, especially after seeing what he can do when he's on in Game 7 against Washington. I think they're going to wind up keeping him. I'm not sure I agree with doing that, but that's something that I think will happen. I think Jonas Jerebko will be back. I think he'll be coming cheap. I don't think he's going to cost much money. I think he made $5 million this year. I think he'll probably make less next year. I don't think he did enough to, warrant a pay raise, definitely in that regard. And Gerald Green is another guy I have coming back. I think he's going to be another guy that comes in cheap. He'll be a guy off the I thought was going to be their good Evan Turner replacement this year, but he didn't get consistent minutes. I think next year he'll be stepping up and he'll be more of that kind of role. If the Celtics don't, make a huge overhaul on their bench, I think Gerald Green will be huge next year for a returning player in his second stint with Boston. As far as who I don't think will be back, I don't think Jay Crowder will be back. I don't think Terry Rozier will be back. I think they'll somehow get packaged in the same deal. I don't know what exactly they'll be going for. I would love a rebounder, and I think if you package those two guys together, you can get a guy that's very, very good down on the block and that can rebound. Tyler Zeller, he's gone.
Yeah.
Amir Johnson, he's definitely gone. James Young, I don't think he's going to be back. I would be surprised if they brought him back. And just for shits and giggles, I put Demetrius Jackson. I don't think he's going to make the team next year. I don't think they're going to keep him down in Maine. I think he's got too much potential, and I don't think the Celtics have a spot for him. And whether they try and trade him or that he just outright doesn't make the team next year, I don't think he'll be back next year. And that's basically who I have for my list. Who do you have for who's not coming back for you?
Basically the same. I mean, Crowder's gone. Like you said, Crowder and Rozier. I think they'll probably go in a trade. I don't know for who or what to where. I think they're gone together. Johnson, he's gone. Tyler Zeller, he's gone. I think Olynyk will probably stay, but I don't know. I mean, it's 50-50, but like you said, he'll probably stay. Yeah, pretty much that's it. And Demetrius Jackson, he's gone.
He's definitely gone.
Forgot about him.
I like him too.
Yeah.
Crowder and Rozier, I mean, I saw one report that said those two and the Memphis first-round pick in 2019 could possibly get the Celtics Paul George. I don't know if that's 100% true. I don't know the legitimacy of that source. I mean, he was on the vertical with Chris Mannix, so I mean, obviously he's got some legitimacy to him. I just don't think that's the kind of deal that Indiana will be going for, considering they turned down 4 first-round picks for Paul George last deadline. So I don't think. I mean, if that's the case, that's kind of showing some favoritism on Larry Bird's side if he's willing to deal for Crowder, Rozier, and a first-round pick from a fairly decent team in Memphis, compared to rejecting 4 first-round picks from a team that Paul George 100% will not re-sign with. So I don't know if that's going to be the case, if that's going to be what the deal is, but I definitely see those two getting packaged in the same deal because I think that'll help the return a lot, especially if you don't give any top draft picks like the Brooklyn pick. We'll go on to ways we think this team could improve. I'll go and I'll start with mine. I say sign a marquee free agent, Gordon Hayward being the top of my list because he's the most likely to leave his team. I have Kevin Durant as a pipe dream in case he opts out. They definitely should go after him again. They absolutely have to get a rebounder next year because we cannot be seeing Robin Lopez, Marcin Gortat dominating the Celtics like they did this year. That's just ridiculous. That's inexcusable. Those are the kind of guys you can take out of a game early. And if you let them get offensive rebound, second chance points, they're going to be in your face all night, and that's not something you want. As far as I think they should not trade the number 1 pick unless they are getting Jimmy Butler or Anthony Davis. Mostly Anthony Davis because I think he can turn this franchise around more than Jimmy Butler could. And if they keep that pick, they should draft Markelle Fultz because he's the guy that I think has the best potential in terms of turning this franchise around. He's the Russell Westbrook type of guy, and he's got a better outside shot than Westbrook. So I think he could be a definite impact player immediately, and he can dominate down the road and be the guy that takes the keys from Isaiah Thomas if, in fact, he leaves after next season. And the last one was, I said, make a big trade, and that should be involving Crowder and or Rozier. Those are my ways to improve the team. What do you have?
Mine's basically the same. I mean, I don't know who is really out there as for rebounding, but they need to get at least someone. And I agree. They should keep the pick unless Anthony Davis is involved. That's my guy. I'm not sure the Pelicans are going to want to move him. They have something going there. But, I mean, who knows what could happen. And I think they should get Fultz. He can turn this franchise around. I mean, they're already rebuilding and they're in the process of turning around, but he can seriously give them a huge step forward to getting Banner 18. And they need Gordon Hayward is my guy. I love him. I love the Brad Stevens, Butler, him connection. And he's going to be unrestricted free agent after next season, I think. I'm correct?
Who, Hayward?
Yeah, Hayward.
No, he's a free agent this year.
Oh, okay. Well, even better. I think he'll be a Celtic. I think that's already kind of in play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely safe to say that if the Celtics do sign a big free agent, odds are it's going to be Gordon Hayward. I don't think it'll be Blake Griffin. I heard there are ties to him, but I don't think they're really that interested in the injury history, the injury risk, because he has hurt a lot. He would really help this team, I think, more than Gordon Hayward, but if he's not going to be healthy in big games like he's been notoriously known for doing in Los Angeles, I think they should definitely look at Gordon Hayward more seriously than they look at Blake Griffin. And if they miss out on Hayward, then you can look at Griffin because I think he'll probably still be on the board, even if or after Hayward signs. Definitely go for Hayward.
Yep.
And we'll move on. We'll talk about who the Celtics should draft number 1 overall. And my list is pretty short. It's Markelle Fultz or Josh Jackson. If they don't draft Markelle Fultz, if they draft Lonzo Ball, I'm probably going to go and root for whoever drafts Markelle Fultz because I don't think Lonzo Ball has the kind of ceiling that a guy like Markelle Fultz or Josh Jackson has. People are saying Jackson's the best player in the draft or he has the highest ceiling. Markelle Fultz, the most polished prospect they've seen in 10 years. So I think if you're going to go with the number 1 pick, you got to have Markelle Fultz or Josh Jackson on your team after draft night. And I think that all but gets Jay Crowder traded because Josh Jackson is a small forward. They do have Jaylen Brown, and then they obviously are looking at Gordon Hayward too. So there's definitely no room for Jay Crowder anymore. And if they draft Fultz, then I just think that's the best move. That's the smartest move. And that's the most polished player that we've seen in the last 10 years. People are saying that he could have like a LeBron type effect if he comes into the league as the number 1 overall pick. Well, who do you think they should take number 1?
Fultz. I mean, you can't really go wrong there. I mean, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Ainge got Josh Jackson, but I'm pretty sure he's going to go Fultz. And in the draft, you go best player available. That's Fultz 100%. I mean, he's a franchise-changing player, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely the lottery. You don't go for the position of need necessarily. You adapt to the best player in the draft, and that's Markelle Fultz. So if that means you have to make a decision between drafting Fultz and trading Isaiah Thomas, I think at the end of the day you're going to have to try and find a partner to take Isaiah Thomas, and I think I wouldn't deal him unless there's like another lottery pick involved. Like if they were to deal him to say Minnesota for the 7 pick, I would do that in a heartbeat because I think there's a guy available there that I would like the Celtics to get a good, solid rebounding forward, and then that's Jonathan Isaac. He's a solid rebounder, and I think he could help this team next year. But that's basically the only deal I would do for Isaiah Thomas, unless the Kings want him for the number 5 pick, and then you could draft Jason Tatum there if he's available. But other than that, Markelle Fultz is definitely the guy to go number 1, and that's going to be the one guy the Celtics and their fans should be looking out for come draft day.
I can't see them really doing anything else other than drafting Fultz from a logical standpoint. I mean, there's stuff we don't know about, but.
And I don't think Lonzo Ball really wants to play in Boston because if he did, he would have come and worked out for them because he's definitely working out for the Lakers. And then he said there's a chance he's going to work out for the Sixers. I don't understand. I know that's his dad talking, but I don't understand why they wouldn't just at least have him show up for a workout because, I mean, there's like a annual difference of $1 million up front between the lads in the league. So you're making less money overall if he goes to the Lakers as opposed to going to Boston. So I don't know. He's already trying to cost his son millions of dollars, and I think it's going to be a trend we see from Lonzo Ball's perspective. So I think the not working out for Boston is going to influence Ainge's decision a little bit. He said it won't, but I think his mind's already pretty made up. It's going to be Markelle Fultz. This is just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, it was just so stupid that probably his father refused to work out for us. I mean, Ainge could have played with Magic Johnson over there in Los Angeles, saying, leaking out fakely, we're thinking about drafting Lonzo, but can't do that now. So, but it's whatever. We're already getting Fultz.
Yeah, it's Fultz or Jackson in my opinion. And if anyone else is drafted, then that just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I know the Jaylen Brown pick came as a bit of a shock last year, but I think this year would be even more of a shock if they don't go the route of Markelle Fultz or Josh Jackson. Mostly Markelle Fultz. I'd be shocked if they took Jackson, but I won't be as mad as if they took Lonzo Ball or Jason Tatum number 1 overall. Definitely Markelle Fultz or Josh Jackson in my opinion.
Ainge does some weird stuff, but I don't think he'd go that far to play with us like that.
Yeah, he won't play with our emotions like that. He's been promising fireworks for years, and I think Markelle Fultz is definitely a fireworks producer, immediate impact player next year. if he is drafted by the Celtics.
Agreed.
We'll go on and we'll talk about our offseason predictions. Right, I'll let you start with that. What do you think they're going to do this offseason?
I'm not really sure they're going to make a huge trade, but I think they're going to make some sort of a trade, like with a Rozier Crowder package. I'm not sure what, but I mean, I'm pretty sure they're going to get Hayward. I honestly think that's in the bag already. I can't really see them making a huge trade, but I hope that Crowder and Rozier are gone with like a Memphis pick or something. I'm not really sure. But other than that, I don't think there's going to be too many fireworks like Ainge has been promising. I think it's just going to be another pretty simple offseason.
Yeah, my offseason predictions start with maxing Gordon Hayward. I think that's going to be something that they do. It's definitely going to be something that is on the top of their list. They did say it was a top priority going after Gordon Hayward. So I think that's going to be the number one move they make this offseason. After that, I said they'll at least dabble in a deal for Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis, or Paul George. I think they're going to at least talk to those three teams. I don't know as though the talks are going to advance into anything serious, but I think they're going to at least gauge the interest of those three teams, and I think he'll hang out the Brooklyn pick for Anthony Davis, and that'll probably be the only trade that involves that pick this year. As far as next year's pick goes, I think he can offer that in either deal for Butler or for George, and get significant interest back. I think they'll dabble in those deals. I don't think they'll get any of the three, but those will definitely be at least touched upon this offseason. And I said they'll sign or trade for some sort of rebounding big, because I think that it is more of a need than adding another scoring option. Because think of all the second chance points they gave up over the course of the season, all the games they lost because teams like the Knicks were hanging around because, a guy like Kristaps Porzingis or Willie Hernangomez were feasting on the glass. And that's something that I think they're going to have to correct. And a name that comes to mind again is Andrew Bogut. He's going to be a free agent, I believe, after the conclusion of the NBA Finals. So he's a guy I would look into. He's an older player. He's not going to cost a lot. He could definitely be a guy that could come either off the bench or start and play limited minutes because of his injury history and his age, and rebound very well for this team. And that's going to be something that definitely should be on the top of their list, as well as signing Gordon Hayward. And that's all I have for my offseason predictions, because like you said, it's going to be fairly simple. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fireworks this offseason from Boston, because I just don't think that they're going to try and mortgage their future to try and go after Cleveland when LeBron's still, I think at least still in his prime of his career, because he's still playing at that high level.
Simply getting a rebound so much.
It would. I mean, granted, it might get you one of those first two games at home against the Cavs, but after that, you're probably one game closer to beating them just by getting a rebounder alone. And I think getting a rebounder might end those series against Chicago and Washington a little sooner, so you have a little bit more rest, so you're not rolling into a series against a very fresh team exhausted after a game 7.
Like, I can't see Robin Lopez doing what he did again. I can't take it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen next year. The Celtics should definitely look at getting a rebounder, and I think Gershon Yabusele is that kind of guy that can be a banger down low, and that's something they definitely need. Ante Zizic, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but I hear he's a very solid rebounder and very good finish around the rim. He's not a great offensive option, but he's definitely a good defensive player and a good rebounder, and that's something the Celtics desperately need, moving forward in their rebuild, and hopefully, eventually next year against the Cavs again in the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll talk about what our predictions are for next season. I have the Celtics going 55-27, improving on their record from this year by 2 games, and Jaylen Brown, will take over as the sixth man at least by middle of the season, and just taking off and running with it. It all depends basically on how he does this offseason in terms of adding weight, improving his shot, improving his finishing ability around the rim, and his free throws. But other than that, I think he's pretty much going to be the sixth man next year, after being a very crucial piece of this team off the bench at times in the playoffs and in the regular season. What are your thoughts for next year?
I think the same. I mean, like 54-28-ish. Jaylen will definitely have a bigger role. I think Brad gained a lot of confidence in him in the playoffs, even though he started out kind of like hesitantly putting him in like stupid minutes at the end where we were already getting blown out. I think he'll definitely have a bigger role. Sixth man, definitely. I think Isaiah will continue his hot streak, but I think he's only going to get better if he stays here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this team is pretty easy to read. I mean, I don't see them taking really any step back. I just don't know if they'll win the conference again. I just don't see Cleveland having another like historically terrible second half with LeBron leading the charge. I mean, the Celtics will go 55-27 and probably come in second by like 5 games next year. And I think, if they draft Markelle Fultz, I could see him being a perennial rookie of the year candidate as a guy that will be either as the sixth man of Jalen isn't or starting with Isaiah Thomas or Avery Bradley next to him. I think he could be a rookie of the year candidate, and I think it would be a much easier decision this year or next year than it would be this year with the three guys that I don't think were really that great getting into the finalist voting for the rookie of the year candidate.
I'm not sure how much of an immediate impact Fultz will have when he is here, but I think he'll definitely help a lot, and he could be rookie of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because the Celtics have so many guards, it depends on really what they do in the offseason. If they draft Fultz, then they're going to have to make moves involving Smart, Rozier, those kind of guys. So that way Fultz could get minutes, because you're not going to draft a guy number 1 overall and then refuse to play him. That's just kind of stupid. It defeats the purpose of keeping the pick to begin with, because he's not getting any better if he's just sitting on the bench as the 12-man, getting meaningless minutes at the end of blowouts.
Yep.
That's all we have. Do you have anything else to add on any of the topics before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Just draft Fultz and yeah.
Yeah, draft Fultz.
Yeah, please.
So that'll do it for this Biased Boston Sports Report, talking about the Celtics, reviewing the season, and then predicting what will happen in the offseason. Kaylee, thank you for joining me today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
No problem. And this will be uploaded on YouTube right after we finish this. So, peace.
Peace.